Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's coffee chat. My name is Daniel Truckenbrough, and I'm an associate marketing manager at Brooks Publishing. And I'm very happy to have Lori Meyer, Molly Milam, and Mikaelin Ostrosky here to talk about friendship skills and strategies for teaching them as part of unpacking the pyramid model. So before we begin, I just have a few webinar tips to cover. First and foremost, if you have any applications open, such as another internet browser or email, if you close those, that can help increase bandwidth for the webinar today. If you have any questions, you can enter those into the questions tab of the webinar panel, and we will be doing a Q&A session at the end where we'll be answering some of those questions. If you'd like to minimize the webinar panel, there's a little orange arrow, and you can click that, and it'll minimize the panel. And if you click it again, it'll expand the panel so you can increase the size of the presentation. And if you have any audio issues during today's webinar, check your audio tab of the webinar panel to make sure that you have the correct audio options selected. Make sure your speakers are turned up. And if that doesn't work, you can exit out and join back into the webinar, and that may alleviate any audio issues that you're having. Sorry, can you go to the next slide? There we go. So Lori, Molly, and Mikaelin are all chapter authors of Unpacking the Pyramid Model, a practical guide for preschool teachers. So Unpacking the Pyramid Model was created by pyramid model developers and experts, and it's the first book that really provides a comprehensive step-by-step overview of the pyramid model for children ages 2 to 5. So if you'd like more information about Unpacking the Pyramid Model, you can go to bpub.fyi/unpacking-pm, and we'll also be including links in a follow-up email tomorrow. So you'll have a link to the book as well as all the resources that are discussed during today's webinar. For this webinar, we're also doing a book giveaway. So we will be giving away one free copy of Unpacking the Pyramid Model. So if you submit your questions during today's webinar, that can increase your chances of winning. And then the winner will be notified by email after the webinar. And then one last thing, certificates of attendance are available for all webinar and recording viewers. And I'll be providing a little bit more information about how to access your certificates towards the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce your presenters today. So Dr. Lori Meyer is an associate professor in the Department of Education at the University of Vermont, where she teaches in the early childhood education and early childhood special education programs. Dr. Meyer's research focuses on young children with disabilities and their families within the context of pre-K and early and elementary experiences. And specifically, Dr. Meyer is interested in contemporary classroom environments and processes used by administrators and teachers to meet the social emotional needs of young children with delays or disabilities. Dr. Molly Milam is an assistant professor in the Department of Education at York College of Pennsylvania and the Applied Behavior Analysis MED program supervisor. Dr. Milam's research interests include pre-service practitioner supervision, coaching and professional development, peer-mediated interventions, and supporting teachers in the implementation of evidence-based practice to improve behavior, friendship skills, and social emotional development. And lastly, Dr. Mikaelin Ostrosky is the Grace Will-Call Gauthier Professor of Education at the Professor and Head of the Department of Special Education at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Through her work at the National Center on the Social Emotional Foundations for Early Learning, Dr. Ostrosky was involved in the development of the pyramid model for supporting social emotional competence in young children. Dr. Ostrosky has been recognized for her professional accomplishments with honors including the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign University Scholar, the Gold Stick Family Scholar, College of Education Senior Scholar, and the Division for Early Childhood of the Council for Exceptional Children's Award for Mentoring. So, Drs. Meyer, Milam, and Ostrosky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for that nice introduction, and welcome to everybody. If you're here live with us or if you're listening to the archive version of this, we welcome you, and we hope that by the end of this hour with us, you'll walk away with some new strategies and new ideas. So now that you know a little bit about us, we'd like to hear a little bit about who you are. So Daniel's going to put up a poll that if you would just select the age group that with which you primarily work. So and you just click right onto that poll that showed up on your screen. Do you mostly work with birth to 3 to 5-year-olds, birth through 5-year-olds, or early elementary? So if you would just click it, we'll give you a couple seconds to do that.
And we have responses coming in. It seems like a majority is working with 3 to 5. I'll just let the poll run for another second or two. And we'll call that good at 30 seconds. Oops. Nope, I clicked the wrong link. Bear with me one second. There we go. Okay, now I can share the results here.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Daniel. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you work with 3 to 5-year-olds, though some of you also in a high percent at 30% also work with from birth through age 5. And then a couple older elementary, a more early elementary, and then some birth to 3. So most of our strategies will kind of focus on the preschool age, though certainly some of these strategies you can work with a little older children, and some of them you can work with toddlers. So that gives us an idea of who we are. So we're going to talk, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview if you don't know what the pyramid model is after I talk about the objectives. So what we hope you'll walk away with by the end of today is you'll have some ideas of characteristics to determine when young children are engaged in friendships, when they actually have more than just a relationship, but a friendship with each other. We'll also provide you with some ideas, some strategies, and some supports so that you can then teach children's friendship skills across routines, across daily activities, and do those in a variety of formats, large group, small group, and individualized. And then finally, we're going to talk about partnering with families, because as we collaborate with families, we can increase the opportunities that children have to work on these important skills that then lead into friendships. So what is the pyramid model? If you don't know what the pyramid model is, it is a framework of evidence-based practices. It's not a curriculum. It's really a way for thinking about organizing effective promotion, prevention, and intervention practices that are related to young children's social emotional competence, and also preventing and addressing challenging behavior. So it's a context in which curriculum, in which evidence-based practices can then be embedded and worked on. The practices are supportive. If you look at the bottom of the pyramid, you see this yellow effective workforce. So all of the practices are supported by an effective workforce. And what that means is that teachers have opportunities to engage in self-reflection. They're open to learning. They respect ideas and perspectives of others that may be different from their own. And they have access to supports that are needed to implement the practices to talk about, and others that you'll read about or hear about if you come to some of the other chats that Brooks is hosting. So you have to have an effective workforce, and actually by the fact that you're here today, that's what we're working on too, right, is professional development. We'll talk about some strategies that go across these 3 main tiers, universal, secondary, and tertiary. Okay, so when we talk about self-reflection being important for professional development and for early educators to really think in each of the chapters in the pyramid model book, and you have it now as a PDF that we attach to this webinar, GoToWebinar, you can download it. There are 18 practices that we want you to, after you leave the webinar, hopefully spend some time, or if you're watching this in an archive version, to step back and really think about the children with whom you work, the classroom setting. Even in your team, you could individually do this self-reflection and think about what practices are you already using and what practices do you want to target to really focus some more time on. So we hope that you'll pull that up either now or after, and Daniel's put it in the handout so you can find it there. After we finish the webinar, you could pull it up and really think critically and carefully about what you're doing and what you can do to improve opportunities for children to develop friendships within your setting. All right, so why are friendship skills important for young children? When we look at what the research tells us, what the literature tells us about key social emotional skills that children need as they enter school, there are several that continually or regularly pop up in the literature, and these are listed here on bullets. Competence is one. Capacity to develop good relationships with both peers and adults is another. Persistence on challenging tasks is one. Ability to communicate emotions effectively. Listening to instructions, so kind of those following group instructions and being attentive, and solving social problems. So we've highlighted the one about good relationships with peers and adults because really teachers who see children coming into kindergarten or even coming in as they are in preschool, they will say one of the skills that they think is really important for young children to develop is having good peer relationships. And some of these others that go underneath, like solving social problems. We might have problems with peers. How do we solve those? Or communicating our emotions when we're upset with a peer. Some of those can go in tandem with this, but it's really a critical area for young children to be successful. So we want you to think for a second about your own best friend. So when you think about friendships in your life, and you could put these in the chat if you want, where Daniel has questions, what are some characteristics? You could write these down, you could just think about them or add them in the chat. What are characteristics that you consider when you think about, why is this person my best friend? What are some words that describe him or her? I'll give you a second to think about that. And I can't see things in the chat, so I'm not sure if you're adding things or not, but I'll tell you some of the words that have come up kind of regularly in the past are things like, I can trust. It's someone I can trust. He makes me laugh. So humor comes into friendships. She's reliable. So we're going to meet, we're going to go do something. She's there, he or she is there for me. We have similar interests and values. So those shared experiences, we like to do the same thing, often come up. So I'm sure you can think of many more when you think about those best friends, those people who are critical and really important to you in your life. But those are things we want to build on. We want to look at children and see who might they naturally gravitate to as friends, but also what are skills they should have, to be able to then be good friends to other people. So I'm going to turn it over to Lori, and she's going to share some information on, how do we know when friendships actually exist? What are some of those characteristics? All right, Lori.
All right, thanks, Mickey. Hi, everyone. So how do you know when a friendship exists? So we talk about two characteristics to look for to really know that a friendship is present between two young children. The first one being reciprocity. So is the relationship reciprocal? That means, is it a mutual liking between the two children? The second characteristic is voluntary. So are both children interested in this relationship voluntarily? So that means no pressure from other peers or other adults in their lives. And we could notice these indicators of friendship in a few ways. So one would be through observing children. So we could look for children who seem to engage and interact with one another frequently. We might even notice how long their interactions are to determine if a relationship is reciprocal. We might also notice who they're interacting with or who they are often in proximity to. So those peers that they tend to gravitate towards or want to spend time with more often. We might also look for positive affect. So smiling and laughing in the presence of other children all can be clues that a friendship is present. Another way that we can find out is just to ask the children who their closest friends are in a classroom. We can even inquire why they think a child in their classroom is their close friend to learn a little bit more about the nature of their relationship and the friendship. And at the same time, we could also ask other important adults in their lives. So we could ask their family. Families are usually great communicators about friendships that exist outside of the school setting. So perhaps friendships in their neighborhoods, in their community. And we could also ask other adults in the school building. So we could ask bus drivers, we could ask anyone, other staff members about who they've noticed children gravitating towards. And when we learn about children's relationships, either through observation or by asking children or other adults, we can also pay attention to aspirational friendships. So a child might express that another peer is their friend, but that relationship may not be mutual yet. But we could honor the fact that a child aspires to have a friendship with another child, or at least through their view that they are close friends with that child. And we could use that information about aspirational friendships when we start to use some of our teaching strategies to support their friendship development. All right, so now it's time for our second poll. Daniel, if you can help us out.
Yes, bringing it up just now.
All right, thank you. So we want to know at what age do children begin to develop friendship skills? So select one of the age ranges that you think is when children begin to start to develop skills related to friendship.
And we've got some responses rolling in now. Just leave it open for a few more seconds.
Excellent.
All right, go ahead and close this and share. There we go.
Okay, so we've got almost half of people responded that friendship skills start between 18 and 24 months, with the next one being the earliest, from birth to 12 months. So this was a little bit of a trick question. So children really start to develop the skills needed to form friendships in their earliest of days. So these are the kind of foundational skills that lead to the more nuanced skills that we think about probably when you think about friendship development. So the table that you see in front of you, the first row is different age groups for children. And then what you see underneath each of the columns is the first column is skills related to relationship development with caregivers. The middle column is skills related to relationships with peers. And the last column is skills related to social emotional development at those different age points. So all of those lead to children's more nuanced friendship skills. And in reality, important adults in children's lives lay the foundation and teach those skills from day one. So as children get older, we can encourage them to work together, we can support them in their play and in their interactions with peers, and we can give them lots of opportunities to practice their friendship skills with one another. So in the photo you see here, a teacher is actively engaged with two children, ready to support if needed. And there's the use of a cooperative toy like a wooden rocking boat, which is fine for one child to use individually, but is much more fun when two children are involved. And all of these skills that we're working on with young children build towards the more sophisticated friendship skills that really help young children form and maintain their friendships. So in our chapter, we give definitions of all of the friendship skills you see here. We describe the characteristics of those skills, we give examples and non-examples, and we do that because in order to teach a skill, we need to know what it looks like, what it doesn't look like, so that we can teach it to young children. So just to take the first one, for example, when a child gives suggestions and can help organize play, they might be able to appropriately get a friend's attention so that they can share their play idea. They might know that they could hand another peer a toy or a material to engage in play, or they might even be able to offer a suggestion of a role or a way to use a material or toy, such as handing their peer a ball and say, "Let's play catch." So these are the types of skills that we work on with young children. And we believe that when children can really master these skills and they can use those skills with many children in their environment, then it increases the likelihood that they'll be able to form close relationships with and friendships with their peers. And it's within that context of friendship that children have lots of opportunity to further practice and refine their friendship skills. So we want to also take a moment to note about when we should teach friendship skills. So what you see in front of you is a challenging situation curve. And it's always important to teach children new skills before they actually have to use them in a situation. You can even teach a new skill when a child is entering a situation that may be challenging for them. You could possibly teach a new skill when a situation begins to become a little bit more challenging. That's certainly a time in that yellow arrow where you can remind a child to use a skill that they've previously been taught. And if a situation does become more challenging and there's conflict present, you can remind the child at that moment also to use their skill, but it's definitely not a time to teach a new skill that they haven't already mastered or been able to use. So just keeping in mind that we are proactive in promoting the social emotional skills and friendship skills before a situation when a child might actually have to use them. So that brings us to the idea of universal promotion. So there's many ways that you can teach friendship skills, and to meet the needs of children in our classroom settings, we most often have to use many of them simultaneously to meet classroom and individual children's needs. So we're going to walk you through a couple examples of friendship teaching strategies, and we're going to use the pyramid model as our guide. So we're going to get started with teaching friendships class-wide, and that means teaching friendship skills to all children. So what you see in front of you are sample lessons and activities that you can use to support friendship development. In our chapter, we call these friendship connection activities. So they're activities that allow you to support children's connections one another, to help them practice their friendship skills, and to show that they care about one another. It's also a great opportunity for teachers to observe for friendship characteristics during these types of activities. And you can turn almost any activity into a friendship connection activity. So I was talking with a friend the other day, and she shared an example of making snack mats in her preschool classroom. And instead of children making a snack mat for themselves, they made a snack mat to share with a peer. So after the mats were painted, dried, and laminated, the children had the opportunity then to not only make a mat for another child, but then they had the opportunity to share it and to experience that sharing and that gratitude of the giving and the receiving. So almost any activity can be reframed as an activity that supports friendship and connection between young children. Another great way to teach friendship skills classroom-wide is to use children's literature. So we could use children's literature to teach the concept of friendship. We can introduce characteristics of good friends and good friendships. We can even introduce or emphasize certain friendship skills that children are working on. And we can engage children in conversations about friendship. So we can encourage them to be empathetic and to think about how characters in a book might be feeling if they're not included. We can encourage them to make connections between their own personal experiences and the characters' experiences in a book. So, you know, what are times when you've wanted to play with someone? What did you say? And we can also encourage them as they get older to really understand the why of why we do things. So you might encourage them to express why they invite other children to play with them. And children's literature is really fantastic for supporting friendship skill development because you can use it throughout the day, and you could also integrate it across multiple learning domains. For example, integrating friendship skills with physical activity and math, just to name a few. So a resource that we want to make sure that you're aware of are book Nooks. So we've included the link here on today's webinar. Book Nooks are a series of social emotional books, so popular children's literature for young children around social emotional concepts, and each book nook provides examples of how you can integrate it across your day, whether it's in music or snacks or circle time or outside time, and also ideas for how you can just continue to use it with other learning domains. So that's a great resource that we want to share with you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Molly, who's going to begin our climb up the pyramid and to the next level of friendship teaching strategies.
Thank you, Lori. And so, yes, I'm going to be talking, we're kind of moving up the pyramid that Mickey introduced the whole thing, and Lori was talking about those universal strategies that you can use. And even if you are really doing an excellent job of incorporating as many strategies as you can at that universal level, there's still going to be potentially some kids that need a little bit extra support. They just need a little bit extra guidance, practice for whatever reason. And so as we think about that, those some kids, there's some specific strategies that you can be incorporating and working into your day and throughout your day for those kids that need a little bit of practice around potentially just really specific friendship skills, or maybe all skills, or it just really depends on the individual. And so we're going to be looking at some strategies related to that, the secondary promotion of friendship skills. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so when we think about I think the for me, this is one of my research interests, is that one of the biggest strategies that falls underneath the secondary promotion strategies is peer-mediated interventions. And so when we think about peer-mediated interventions, we can look at this in terms of, you know, 3 different levels of who's involved. I think it's important to point out too, when we're thinking about peer-mediated interventions, it's more than these cooperative activities or friendship activities that you're designing, because you're doing a lot ahead of time to prime those peer buddies to assist, you know, and be those mini teachers for you. So that's how, you know, I separate that peer-mediated from those more cooperative activities that you're already potentially incorporating into your classroom universally. So when we think about the adults, right, typically it's going to be a teacher. There are some peer-mediated interventions that have worked really well with siblings at home, though, so it can be used across environments. So you can be using a sibling instead of a peer in the classroom. So a parent or a teacher really could be that adult in this hierarchy that we see here. When we're thinking about peer buddies, there's certain, and I think there's still, you know, some investigation that is needed, but we think about peer buddies as those children who it's really clear that they are really efficient and can use those friendship skills that you want to focus on really well with a variety of kids. And we also, though, you know, they can do it well, they can engage and follow those directions because you're teaching them certain skills. But we also want to make sure that they're following along with the end goal, which is creating friendships. So we don't want to be potentially pairing children up and choosing a peer buddy that really has no similar interest to that target child. That kind of defeats the purpose a little bit, right? So the goal is that children are going to have similar interests. They potentially would be in that similar play group. It might be that the peer buddy or the target child in different situations has said that they're so-and-so's friend, but you're not seeing that as evidence in the classroom because potentially the target child is just missing some of those. They're not able to effectively use those friendship skills. So thinking about long-term, the goal is that these peer buddies and target children want to play together. And so you are choosing peer buddies thinking long-term, thinking about that end result that you hope you will achieve, which is, you know, building those friendship skills between 2 kids. So when we think about those peer buddies, I think that's the biggest piece of deciding whether, you know, peer-mediated intervention is going to be successful. Yeah, it's a little teacher in the classroom. I think we can all think about who those kids could be, but you also have to be cognizant of who that target child is who needs that extra practice with skills to make sure there is some pairing that's done pretty specifically to make sure that you are hopefully fostering friendship between those 2 children. So when we're thinking about peer-mediated interventions, we have the adults training through training sessions, peer buddies to implement specific strategies with target children. And again, it's those peer buddies then that are directly providing practice for target children. And the goal is that once you train peer buddies to do whatever and to implement whatever strategies, the adults take a back seat. They watch, they provide feedback. They might be, you know, doing some encouragement, especially near the beginning of implementation. But the goal is that adults aren't having a lot of direct contact with the children, which really ends up hopefully being an interaction that is more natural in the environment. If an adult's always having to go and impromptu and facilitate, you end up having a situation where the kids are stopping that potentially high quality interaction to look at an adult, right, or to follow that guidance. And so it's taking away from that natural situation a little bit. So the goal is that you are training, spending a lot of time training ahead of time, so you can watch. You can do other things in the classroom. It frees up your time because you have trained your little teacher and your little peer buddy to help with certain children with certain skills. Okay. Next slide, please. So there are different types of peer-mediated interventions. We're going to be focusing on Stay, Play, Talk because we do have limited time today. There is a resource that Daniel's going to share, and it's linked here. And so it is focusing on then what are the steps in implementing Stay, Play, Talk in an early childhood classroom. And there's visuals that are included, which are really helpful. Stay, Play, Talk is really what it sounds like, right? You're teaching a peer buddy to stay with that target child, that you're teaching them then to play in a similar way or similar materials as their target child's playing with. And then you're teaching them to talk about and comment on play, right? So you're trying to build that communication between children as they're playing. And so really it's named Stay Play Talk because that's what you're teaching the peer buddies to do. There are visuals here, depending on how you want to teach it. I think it's really important when you're thinking about what those instructional times are going to look like when you're teaching the peer buddy. You are pairing that language with the visuals, and so it's easy for you to provide reminders when the peer buddies are expected to do it in a real situation in the classroom during buddy time is what I like to call it, right? So, you know, you're being really consistent in that language and how you're teaching the peer buddies to implement those strategies. The example here in that top right corner is just a way that you then could provide feedback to a peer buddy after buddy time. So it's like, oh, it's buddy time, you're watching this interaction. Hopefully the peer buddies are able to implement these strategies. You see some really high quality interactions between the peer buddies and target children. And then you do a check-in afterwards where you're reviewing what the peer buddy did really, really well, examples of what they were doing during that time. And potentially then, okay, I saw you, you were playing together, you were staying together, but I didn't really hear you talk. So what can you say next time if you're playing with this toy, if you're doing this activity? So you're then, you know, preparing them for next time, building those skills, providing that feedback. And that's really important that you're still continuing to look at this in terms of, can I improve in how the peer buddy is implementing this, and how can I encourage them to continue doing this, right? Which is really providing that really high quality, direct, descriptive feedback for them. When we think about peer-mediated interventions in general, you know, Stay Play Talk is one specific intervention, but peer-mediated interventions are even, you know, have been used and are being explored, the uses in terms of helping children transition. So can we assign a peer buddy to help a child transition versus a teacher being that person that has to go and be that one-on-one assistant who's helping a child transition. And so again, Daniel's hopefully sharing that PDF with you guys so you'll have it. It has some really cool visuals for you guys and some steps in more detail to implement Stay Play Talk with your students. Next slide, please. Okay. And so then, you know, we're moving up the pyramid more. So even if we're providing this universal supports, we have some peer-mediated interventions, some Stay Play Talks, and buddy time set up. Potentially, we still have students that need more help around specific friendship skills, really, really individualized. It's just, you know, we need to design something specifically for that one student. And so the book chapter talks about a few different strategies. We're going to highlight a few here. Next slide, please. And so I think Super Friends, I think, is becoming more popular. It's always surprising to me when, you know, so many people have heard about it. There's so many different visuals. If you Google Super Friends, I think the visual on the left is the original Super Friend social story, a scripted story. So when we're thinking about scripted stories, they can be written very specifically to an individual child's needs. So if there's a specific skill a child is needing to practice or needing to understand the importance of, you can build that into a scripted story. Super Friends is an example of one that's pretty widely known, I think, in the pyramid model world. The visual on the right is actually a newer format of a Super Friend Award. So you can be highlighting then those specific skills that you're addressing in that scripted story, then when you're actually thinking about providing that individualized feedback to specific students. Super Friends can be used class-wide too, right? So you can have visuals up around the room and you're using that language with all students. I think when you're thinking about it more individualized, you might be editing that Super Friends story to be around very specific skills that a certain specific student needs, and that's your focus. So again, it can be used at different levels of the pyramid, which is really cool too. Next slide, please. So another top of the pyramid strategy is play scripts. This is an example. It's an older study, but I really like this example because really you are in some way providing a script, what it sounds like, for children's play. So the goal would be that you're focusing on an activity that target child really enjoys, so they're more likely to want to engage in that area. But then you're actually providing them with the words and the actions to take to engage in that interactive play with one child or multiple children. What I like about this example is that you actually can see 3 different options for kids based on ability level. So if you have a child that is minimally verbal, right, okay, well, they're just going to say a few words, right? Or you have a child that is nonverbal, where then they're just doing actions, right? So you're actually thinking about, what is this script going to look like? What would this play look like then how am I going to teach specific kids with different ability levels to then engage in that script? And then you do have a child that is more, would be higher language, right, that is more elaborated, that says longer phrases. So you can adapt it for specific kids, and you have the script that's individualized, but at the same time, then potentially you could use it with different kids that have different ability levels as well. And another, and we've talked about visuals, we've looked at visuals as I've been talking, but really tuning into and using visuals really explicitly with kids that need extra help at that top of the pyramid is really important. Here's an example of just, initiating play. And so you have those different steps, right? You actually are carrying those around, you're reminding students of what those are. These are pictures you can Google. There's lots of different options. Sometimes for some students who are really new to visual prompts, visual cues, you can have them, you can take pictures of real kids, take pictures of them doing something and be referring to that. And it's really going to be whatever is going to be the easiest for individual students to understand. So keeping in mind that it might be that they're not going to understand potentially just a cartoon drawing, but then can I actually position kids and take pictures so it's real children in the classroom demonstrating something, and that can be really meaningful for students. Okay. And the last piece is an activity matrix specifically related to friendship skills. The example we see here along the left is routine. So throughout the day, you have arrival, circle time, free choice snack, and then you have different children across the top. And then what you're going to be doing related to different friendship skills in those different times of day. You do see some activity matrix that are specific to one child, right? And then you actually can have a routine down that left column, and across the top you have different skills. So then you can be sure to be practicing and focusing on different skills for that one child throughout the day. So there's different ways you can set this up, but I think making activity matrix can be really helpful for you and other assistants, other adults in the classroom, to make sure that you're using and really taking advantage of all those natural situations and opportunities across the day. And again, this is for you, but also other adults in the classroom then can know, okay, wait, this child's over at this center right now. I'm going to go over there and work on this skill, right? And it's really an easy way to lay that out and be able to see how often you can practice it. And then you can potentially build data collection and monitoring into an activity matrix as well.
Okay, thanks, Molly. That was great. And I hope our audience, or if you're listening to this as an archived webinar, you're getting lots of ideas, because I think Molly and Lori both, in a very short amount of time, gave you lots of strategies to really think about. So one of the things that we try to talk about throughout the book, and that's really important to us as three presenters, but also to all of those associated with the pyramid model, is the partnerships with families in support of children's social emotional competence. So if we think about collaborating with families, we can get more bang for the buck as we think about teaching social emotional skills. So we can, and in our particular webinar, when we're thinking about friendship skills, by partnering with families, we can work with them, we can collaborate with them to then give children more opportunities to develop those skills that are needed to strengthen their friendships. So three main ways we want to talk about as far as fostering those friendships through family partnerships are, the first is to learn from families. So to talk with families about who are the friends that their children talk about at home, who are the friends that when their child sees that other peer at the library or out at the park, does the child get really excited about? Because those might give you ideas as natural play, who might be natural play partners at school. Or who might you partner those children together to do a cooperative learning activity or some shared art activity together. So learning from families who it is that their children talk about, who it is their children gravitate to in the neighborhood. Also, the second idea is to share with families some of the friendship moments that happen at school. So that can be through notes, through photographs. I mean, with digital cameras, we can share photographs easily, through formal and informal conversations that you might have, especially once we're back face to face, when kids are being dropped off or picked up. sharing with them what you're seeing about children doing with their friends at school. So taking those photographs, writing the communication book, mentioning those moments. I know as a parent of a now young adult, I always loved seeing and hearing about what my child was doing, or even when I'd show up to pick him up, who's he playing with out on the playground? And even now I'm watching who's he interacting with on the ball field when he's playing ball. So I think you're interested, especially if social emotional development is something you really value. We know it's important to have friends. So sharing those with families, they'll appreciate it too. And then helping families promote friendship skill development at home. So like Molly showed the matrix of ideas you can think about at school and how you might promote friendship skill development at school, you can work with families too and think about strategies that they could use to teach friendship skills at home. So it could be with siblings or even just with the parent during play. If a child is struggling with turn taking or with sharing, then as a parent sitting there playing with blocks with their child, they could purposefully limit the number of materials they're using with the child to work on those sharing, turn taking kind of skills. So we can think of, and we can also send home book lists. So Lori mentioned some books that we can use. There are so many books, and you'll find lists of books on our website if you go to Pyramid Model Consortium or NCPMI that have all kind of categorized books that you can use that support friendship development. You can have a lending library from your classroom, or even just suggest books that family members could get at their local library. We also on NCPMI, there's a series called the Backpack Connection, and we'll put some links. You'll see links in the handout section that Daniel will put, and Lori will show them to you, some examples of this on the next slide. NCPMI has a whole series of Backpack Connection materials that are free, they're downloadable, and many of them focus on friendship types of skills. So the three that we put up here on this slide, one focuses on taking turns, one's on learning to share, and one's on learning to trade. These are resources, free, one-page, simple resources that you could, if we're back at school, the idea is to copy them, print them off, and put them in a child's backpack so they could take them home. You could put them in a newsletter, put the link in a newsletter, or if you do e-letters or emails to families, you put the direct links to the different ones for either individual children, or if you're working on things like sharing as a class-wide universal strategy, you could share them with all families. So as you think about parents, or teachers, you being resources for families, sharing materials like these through newsletters, through through newsletters or through a backpack, really again then furthers the development of these kind of skills, because children can be practicing these skills at home. So why spend time supporting young children's social emotional skills, and in particular their friendship skills? What's the research shown us about the benefits that come? What are the positive outcomes from having friends? So some of the ones that we wanted to just highlight, and we hope that we've impressed upon you across this webinar, it helps children with self-confidence and self-esteem. So they feel better about themselves as they're engaged in interactions with friends. They develop social skills. So children, from interacting with others, both siblings at home as well as peers at school, they learn how to share and to take turns. And some may need more support, as Molly talked about, as you move up the tiers of the pyramid model. Children can develop more positive attitudes about people who are different from themselves, and it may be abilities, but it may be all kinds of, racial, ethnic, gender. So as you support these friendships and these development of social skills, children can develop more positive attitudes about children who have different strengths than they have, and also children who have different needs than theirs. For children with disabilities, and really all children, we see equal, if not greater, developmental progress, and that can be across academic skills, but also children eventually needing fewer special ed services, having higher graduation rates in the long term when we have friends. So we're more motivated, we're more engaged. Contributes to quality of life. I think those of us, many of us are kind of stuck at home, and we really miss our friends, right? We really miss, even if we can be on Zoom and interact with our friends, a lot of us are just chomping at the bit to try to get together with our friends and engage in some outdoor sitting around, having a cup of coffee together, not just over Zoom. So definitely friends can contribute to a higher quality of life. And they also help with our capacity to be more empathetic. So as we, watch our peers, as we have fun and we laugh with our peers, we might also see our peers being sad, needing support. So they help, having those skills, having friends helps us become more empathetic. So we hope through this webinar that we've helped you kind of peek into some of the tiers of the pyramid model. This was not an exhaustive webinar, clearly. You can find more information on a lot of the free websites, or the free resource with the free resources we've given you, as well as like NCPMI website or Pyramid Model Consortium website. But what are some things we want you to think about? That close friendships are reciprocal, they're voluntary, they have many benefits, lots of social outcomes, social emotional outcomes, as well as academic outcomes for young children. Friendship skills, so teaching these skills like the turn taking, the sharing, the trading, the giving compliments, the being empathetic, they help children form and maintain friendships, which, as we just talked about, then contribute to a better quality of life, higher quality of life. Friendship skills can be taught. So if children don't have those skills, you move up the pyramid model and you teach those skills in small groups, one-on-one if needed. So they can be taught using a variety of materials and a variety of strategies, and they can be taught across daily routines and activities, both at school and, as we talked about, at home in the community. We can teach friendship skills at the library, during a t-ball game, soccer games. And partnering with families can foster children's friendships. We can learn from one another because families can tell us things that are working at home, but also we can share strategies and stories that we're using at school so that families can then use those and try to implement those at home. So before we answer some questions, we wanted to just do one last poll. So we've also put our email here. We thank you for attending. So we wanted to do one last poll to see what strategies you're most likely to use. And this is for our own information, I guess. So if you just would select one, as you think about going back to your own classrooms or your homes if you're a family, or you're a part of a team, what strategies do you think you're most likely to use pretty soon? So Daniel, you tell me when we're ready.
Yep, poll is open now and we're getting responses in. Seems like overwhelmingly most people are going to try and implement all of these strategies.
Okay.
And I will let it run for just a second more.
Okay, thanks. And then we'll go to questions.
Yep. All right, I'll close it here and I'll share our results.
Okay, so 65% said all of them. That's great. And some of you have particular ones that you're thinking of that you're going to focus on as a beginning place. And don't forget to pull up the checklist of effective friendship practices. It'll be a great reminder. It's a great self-reflection and see kind of where do I want to start with this. So we have probably about 10 minutes that we'll do some questions, assuming that you've sent some questions into the chat, and Daniel's going to read some of those questions and then we'll try to answer them for you. We're not going to focus on particular individual children because we strongly believe without us seeing a child engaged in an interaction or in your classroom with kids, we don't want to try to be kind of armchair supporters throwing out ideas. So he's going to share the more general questions. Okay, Daniel.
All right, so we certainly got a number of questions come in during the webinar. So I guess to start a bit more broadly, we had a few listeners that were asking if these friendship skills and strategies, would they be applicable to a kindergarten setting? So outside of the age range, but could it be applied more broadly?
Absolutely. So absolutely, you can use these with kindergartners. Given how, at least in the US, more academically focused many kindergarten classrooms are, we probably gave more play ideas. So you may have to think more cooperative learning, joint activities. Lori and I were engaged in a study where we had science activities that children did. Certainly, they were making murals together. They were building bird nests together. Certainly, you could support friendship skills around those kind of more, what I would say, are academically oriented. Lori or Molly, you want to add anything?
I would strongly encourage using them with kindergarten students and just doing what Mickey said, like adjusting it so that it works for you while you're simultaneously focusing on friendship.
Thank you. Molly.
No, I was just going to say, there's peer-mediated research for all ages, like high school even, right? So it's one of those things that is universal. You're obviously changing the skills you're focusing on teaching, but there's research for all ages.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Let's see. So we had a few listeners who were asking if you have any tips or suggestions for creating buy-in with teachers for using the pyramid model when there's already a universal program being used in the classroom. So kind of engaging teachers in with the pyramid model and getting them to actually implement pyramid model practice in their classroom.
Well, there's research out there to show the benefits of pyramid model and the outcomes that have been associated for children with it. I think, sometimes we start small, like a classroom, so you may not be able to get all the preschool classrooms in your building to implement pyramid model strategies, but you believe in it and you have read about it, or someone who has tried it, then start with your classroom. And then see, we've often had teachers when that's been the case who then other preschool classroom teachers will say, hey, what is it you're doing in that classroom? How's that working? So, and it's a group of strategies. So while we think it fits together in this tiered model, there are certainly curriculum out there that focus on particular social emotional skills that could be used in tandem with pyramid model, the kind of philosophy, the framework that goes behind it. Lori or Molly, others?
Yeah, I was going to emphasize that idea that the pyramid model is a framework and not a curriculum. So perhaps the model that's already being used, you could talk about the similarities, you could talk about where it fits within the pyramid model. You can kind of just explore that pyramid model together and talk about the similarities. You could talk about, what ways might we try pieces like that are focused around pyramid model approaches, and start small. And that's where I would start kind of in conversation to see how whichever practices you're using, how they fit together with the pyramid model.
And I think emphasizing it's not either or, like it's not like the teacher has to stop using what they're previously using. I think a lot of the strategies that we've talked about can be then used to enhance, what's occurring already in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. So Molly, you had mentioned the peer buddy strategy. And so we had a bunch of listeners who were saying that they thought it was a great idea, but they were asking if you think it's okay to implement that at any time in the year, or is it better to target that more towards the beginning of the year and use it as like use it from the beginning of the year onwards?
I mean, I really think you could implement it any time of the year. For me, it's almost, do you know your students enough at the beginning of the year to actually know which students are going to potentially work well as peer buddies and target children, which skills are needed. So to me, you need a little bit of time to get to know your students and get to know their needs before you implement. But otherwise, you really are introducing this as like, hey, we're going to learn something together. We're going to start implementing this. So I don't think there is a specific time. I think it might be too that you're realizing near the end of the year that, there's certain kids and everybody's generally, most students seem to be able to use this skill, but there's a few students who are still struggling. So it might be that you're not even identifying specific areas you have to focus on until near the end of the year. So I do think it's something that you can be really putting into place anytime you see a need for it.
Yeah. And I was actually just talking with students about this the other day. One of the things you can do from early on in the school year around peer-mediated interventions is be noticing who are the peers who you think have really great friendship skills, who might turn into those peer buddies, and who things like the students who have great attendance, because you'd want those peer buddies to be present, so that when you're ready, if you notice a child who needs that type of support, that you know who you might train.
Great. All right, let's see. Lost my place. So we had a few listeners who were also asking. They have some teachers in their program that use phrases such as "we're all friends here," or they address the class collectively as friends. Do you have any opinions on this sort of phrasing? Do you think it can be helpful or detrimental, or is it kind of just a neutral phrasing? What are your thoughts on using that sort of terminology?
So there was that, I can't remember her name, Paley, Virginia Paley, I think, book years and years ago, like We All Play Together or something, that had the same kind of conversation coming up. Are we all friends? To me, the important thing is you're creating an accepting classroom, a classroom community. And you know what? If I don't like to play soccer, it doesn't matter that I'm not going to go outside and play that game. If you're bugging me to play it. It's not my thing to do. But how we treat each other and how we say, no, thanks, I don't want to play. I think that's more important. Personally, it doesn't bother me when people say that, like we're all friends, especially for young children developmentally, because they kind of get that means we're all a group. That's what it means developmentally. But as children move older, does that mean I can never say, no, I don't want to do that? But can I can't bully someone. I can't say you can't join this activity. Now, if only 3 kids can come in the center and we're at 3, then we need to think about a strategy of how can that child eventually come in and someone else transition out. I don't know, Lori or Molly, do you have strong kind of feelings against that or for that phrase?
I feel like this is like the art of teaching. I feel like my preference is I often call children like classmates. We're all classmates. But if I notice that, 2 children are friends, or you're a group of friends, or you have a close friend, I try to name that friendship when I see it. But I do appreciate the idea of we're all being friendly to one another. So in essence, we do want to all be friends with our classmates because we want to treat each other with respect and kindness. So whatever feels right for you. I don't know if there's a wrong way to go. Molly, do you have strong feelings?
No, I don't think I do. I look at it in terms of like, from my perspective, it's like you're kind of teaching empathy in terms of like, how do you feel if you're playing by yourself, right? So like we want to be inclusive, right? So it's not like a phrase I use, but at the same time, I'm like not against it, right? But it's getting students to realize that, I don't necessarily, I'm not happy when I'm playing by myself, right? So how can we actually create this environment where we're helping our friends, with their emotions too. Kind of how I look at it.
My nephew's school has one of those friendship benches in early elementary where if you want to play but you don't really have anyone to play with, you can sit on it and then someone will invite you over. And the feedback I've received from my sister is he's said it at home at times that other kids, well, we invited so and so to come play tag with us because he was sitting on the friendship bench. So it's how it's all presented is what's the kind of emotion, the context of your classroom. What's it feel like? What are you creating in that community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, I think we have time for one more question. So we got a few listeners who are asking about math skills in particular, and if you could provide any potential ways to embed social emotional learning into math lessons, or ideas for incorporating friendship skills during math lessons. Go
on, Laura. You look like you're ready to answer this.
Oh no, I'm trying to think of examples.
I can think of partner activities where kids are working on patterning and taking turns. They have a group of blocks and we're taking turns that either you do it and then I do it and I check it to see if yours is right and you check mine, or we do it together. We have to create a pattern and you have some blocks, I have some, and we're doing. So I can imagine creating almost any activity where you could think about doing something as turn taking, as sharing. I don't know. What other ideas do you have for math?
It just goes along with manipulating the environment, right? So those shared materials to ensure, like, okay, instead of just, I'm going to give each child a set or something to do, you're going to have those shared materials between them, right? But it's kind of goes along with what Mickey was saying.
Yeah, it's being intentional, being planful. So any activity, and that's why I think things like the matrix that Molly showed early on, if you have a couple children who are struggling with some of these kind of social emotional skills around friendship, then thinking carefully about what's my day going to look like. And that would be where you're in that middle tier where you're then thinking, okay, so for Lily, what am I going to do to focus, for her to work on these skills? Or Sydney, what am I going to do for her to work on these particular skills during certain times of the day?
Yeah.
Well, you can think about cooperative games. Oh, sorry, but you think about cooperative games and cooperative math games, right? Is that what you're going to say, right? Where you incorporate, that type of back and forth shared turn taking experience too within math games.
Yeah, the reason I got so excited when I heard that question is because there's so many ways you could take it depending on the age of the children. So I think about like young children, toddlers, maybe you're helping them learn how to rote count. And so they're outside and you're going to have a race. So they're racing, not competing, but just running with their friends. And you can say, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. And that could become part of their play script. If it's outside, maybe one of the ideas you're sharing with families is how to create a hopscotch game. So cooperative game with ideas of how they might play that with their neighbors, and they're working on identifying their early numerals. So I feel like you could take it a lot of ways, but just thinking about always reframing, how can I incorporate this as a way to interact with other peers?
Great. Okay, well, there are a ton more questions, but unfortunately we just don't have the time to get to them. So thank you for everyone that submitted questions, and Molly, Mickey, and Lori, thank you for taking the time to answer those. So I do just have a few more things to cover before we wrap up this webinar today. So first and foremost, certificates of attendance are available for everyone here live today and all the recording viewers as well. If you're here live, you can download the certificate from the handout section of your webinar panel. You can also access it at this URL on your screen here. And you'll also be getting a follow-up email tomorrow that again will have all the resources that were listed today, as well as a certificate of attendance, and there will be a link to a recording as well. So you can watch a recording at any time that is more convenient for you. And then next, there will be a quick webinar survey at the end of this webinar. There will just be a little prompt for you to complete a survey. Just let us know what you thought about this survey, and you can provide thoughts for future topics as well. And then we'll select one survey participant to receive a free copy of Unpacking the Pyramid Model. And we are also extending a 20% discount to all Coffee Chat viewers. So you can save 20% on your order at brookspublishing.com using the code COFFEE121. So if you're interested in purchasing Unpacking the Pyramid Model or any of our other Brooks products, you can save 20% on your order there. And if you're looking for additional professional development opportunities, we have tons of Coffee Chat recordings available, and we have several more Coffee Chats scheduled for the spring season, and then we'll be continuing in the fall as well. So there's plenty of recordings to watch. There are plenty more upcoming. So you can find those at bpub.fyi/coffee-chats or just on the homepage of brookspublishing.com. And there's a little software update pop up. And then last but not least, we have tons of COVID-19 resources. Hopefully we are nearing the end and these resources won't necessarily be needed anymore, but we are all still dealing with this. So while we do have these resources compiled. These include recommended reading, downloadable resources, and other professional development webinars that are all geared towards early childhood professionals. And you can find those at bpub.fyi/COVID-EC. And I think that should be it. So with that, I'd like to say a big thank you to Lori, Mickey, and Molly for presenting this fantastic webinar. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. But big thank you. You've presented like tons of great information, and everyone in the audience has just been extremely appreciative of everything provided. So Molly, Mickey, and Lori, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you all. And our email's on the handout. So if one of your questions was a burning one and you want to email one of us, we'd be glad to field that. Thanks, Daniel, for hosting us.
Yes,
Yep, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.